Can you hear me? Okay. Okay, so sorry about Tuesday. Had an earlier appointment. We are at Pirkei Avos, Perek, Mishneh. And Mishneh comes back to Hillel. We had Hillel and Shammai that were in the last Perek. They were still part of the last part of the Zugos. And the Hillel and it was the reason why we bring him back over here, and we could have just continued over there when Hillel spoke between Hillel and Shammai, is because Rabbi Yehuda Anasi wanted to relate the history of the Nesiim, and Hillel was the last of the Zugos, and then we had Rabbi Gamliel, and then Shimon, and then again Rabbi Gamliel. So he wanted to come down to show the 5 generations that were after Hillel, and then they bring him back. And the reason to bring him back here, because he's also talking about similar ideas about what Rabbi Yehuda Nasi and his son were speaking about before, which is community things. Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Yehuda Nasi were speaking about how to behave towards the community. So Hillel, we'll start the Mishnah, Mishneh, Hillel Omer. Hillel says like this. This is a klal that normally we, especially in the summer, and especially, in fact, by this parsha, in Parshas Behaloischa, Shlach, I'm sorry. Al tifresh min hatzibur. A person should not separate himself from the community. Val taman ba'atzmcha ad yom moischa. And don't believe in yourself until the day you pass away. I'm just going to finish the Mishnah, and then we'll come back to each statement that he's saying, because he's saying a lot with each statement. Then, of course, he says, don't judge anybody. You don't judge someone if you see somebody doing something wrong until you've reached his place, meaning until you're standing in somebody else's shoes, you have no clue what's really going on in his head and what is going on. And don't say something that when you say it, the original intent is not understood. Because then later, eventually, on the grounds that you're saying it now, that you're saying something that you're assuming that somebody else understands and will understand in the future what happened, because you could be putting yourself in jeopardy. It's a very smart klal to say. A person should know. Don't say things that may be mistaken or misunderstood or taken out of context. Don't say, when I have time is when I'm going to get to it. And unfortunately, many, many times you just never get to it and never gets done. So all of these klalim are all really behavioral things that each one should take into consideration. I'm going to try to go through some of them so that we should understand what the story and what the Hillel is trying to say. The first thing he said was, Al tifresh min hatzibur. Don't separate yourself from the klal, from the tzibur. When you have a group of people together, you behave differently when you know them than when you don't know them. So there are many reasons why you shouldn't separate from them. First of all, in order to daven with the minyan, you have to have 10 people. When you daven, there's a klal, b'roif am hadras melach. There's a beauty in numbers. When many, many people come together and they daven in one place, you're giving a lot of cover to the Rebbeinu Shalom. You're putting a lot of beauty into your tefillah when you do it in a larger group. Now, Lafarge will explain one of the reasons why this is good and why this is better. Because each and every person has wonderful traits, did a lot of mitzvahs and ma'asim tovim, and unfortunately, there's no person on earth that has not sinned. If you daven individually, the Rebbeinu Shalom takes your davening as one person, And he looks at you and he says, okay, so now let me judge you. Let me see how you behave and how I should listen to you and how I should not listen to you. So if he does something that morning he didn't do so well, he didn't behave himself, so to speak, and then he goes and runs to daven, so Rebbeinu Shalom says, why should I listen to him? But if he goes into a shul where there's a whole bunch of people, there's a million plus, then what the Rebbeinu Shalom looks at is everybody as one complete package. And in this minyan, there are people that did this morning, there are people that did this yesterday, there are people that... So he looks at everything, all the wonderful traits that each one of them have, and he combines it into one. So therefore, the tefillos, I'm almost kabel to the Rebbeinu Shalom. On his own, somebody that was alone at home, the Rebbeinu Shalom can only judge you as you are alone. If you are alone, you certainly did not do a lot of the things that between 35 people, each one did something different. So you have 35 different chusim that he can listen to. Well, unfortunately, you are alone. You could have only done only one or two, and therefore your tefillos are not as accepted as they would be in a minyan. That's one of the main reasons why besides the fact davening with a tzibur, you say different things. You say kaddish, you can say kedusha. So davening with a tzibur has elements of a higher form of kedusha. The when the 10th person walks in, the first 10 people bring the Shechina into the base of Medrash, into the Shul, the base of Knesset, and this Shechina is really the kedusha of Hashem. So it's imperative. It's if any time possible, you should always daven with a minyan. That's the one of the reasons al tifresh min hatzibur. That's one thing. Then of course, like I said earlier, a person wants to do something not proper, he's not going to do it in front of people that he knows. So what he's going to do is actually go to a place that he can do things and not be recognized and try to get away with it. So when you don't separate yourself and you do listen to Hillel, your behavior is always going to be, you'll be much more careful in your behavior. You'll always be doing the right thing, hopefully, so that you don't want to be judged the way maybe you are, unfortunately. So it's very important to stay together as a tzibur. That's now when we're coming back to tefillah, there is to me this is one of my I'll use this word term, one of my favorite stories. There was in the 50s and the 40s, there was a conductor of an orchestra. His name was Arturo Toscanini. Arturo Toscanini was an Italian. He was actually very pro-Jewish. In fact, he was the conductor for the first Jewish orchestra in Eretz Yisrael. The first time the Israeli Philharmonic performed, he was the conductor. He was an exceptional conductor. He was known for his precision. Everything was done in something that is incredible. And obviously, he was very famous, and he went all over the world, and he actually was in New York for many, many years. And there was a guy writing a story up about him. Actually, I think he was writing even a book on him. And he called him up and he said, "Can I come and interview you again?" Because he had interviewed him once or twice. He says, "Yes, you can, but not tonight. Tonight I'll be busy." So he says, "Why are you going to be busy? What do you be doing tonight? That's so important." So he says, "Well, they're playing an orchestra is playing in Italy, and I have it on shortwave radio." He has it in those days with they were able to bring it in. They didn't have the things that they have today, but shortwave radio was around, so he was able to bring this in. They called it shortwave radio because it was not public radio. It was like more connected together, almost like a phone. And I want to hear this particular orchestra because they're doing something. I don't remember the specific thing that they were going to be playing, and I want to hear it. So I like to be alone, and I like to concentrate. I don't want to. So he says, so the writer is thinking to himself, this is a phenomenal opportunity to see him in his element, although he won't be himself performing, but to see how he listens to an orchestra, how Arturo Toscanini listens to somebody else conducting an orchestra. And he said, "May I come and listen? And I won't disturb you." So he said, "If you tell me you're going to sit quiet throughout this performance, you can come." So he said, "Sure, I'm going to come." So he comes and he sits down and the orchestra starts to play. Now, this Arturo was a perfectionist. So he's listening to this orchestra play, and to the fellow that was with him, it was absolutely stunning. It was absolutely stunning. But he's watching his face, Arturo's face, and he sees he's constantly like making a serious face as if he's not happy. But he obviously couldn't ask any questions. And Arturo is totally concentrating on this orchestra. And when it's finished, the fellow who heard it was so overwhelmed. It was so beautifully done that he tells Arturo. He says, "Arturo, wasn't this unbelievable? It's incredible." And Arturo looks up at him with a like a tough face, and he says, "Are you kidding? It's wrong. It's wrong." And he kept shaking his head when he was listening. He kept shaking his head to the negative, back and forth. And he says, "What do you mean it was wrong? It was gorgeous." He says, "Couldn't you hear it? Couldn't you hear it?" So he says, "What?" He says, "There are supposed to be 18 violinists, and there are only 17. It's missing one violin." And meanwhile, the violin was not the only instrument there. Obviously, in an orchestra, there was probably 70, 80 instruments there. And he says, "Are you really?" She says, like Arturo is looking at him as if he doesn't get it. You don't get it. It was missing a violin. And he's thinking to himself, 17 violins and 18 violins. What's the difference? You got 17 violins. But he said he didn't say a word. The next morning, he calls up Italy and he said, "I want to speak to the conductor." So he gets the number to the conductor and he asks him this question. He says, "Can you do me a favor and can you tell me how many violins were there last night in the orchestra?" He says, "Where are you calling from?" He says, "I'm calling from New York." So he says, there's a little bit of a hesitation. And he says, "We were supposed to have 18. One of them called in sick, and we only had 17. So he says, "Why are you asking this question?" So he tells him the story. "I was listening to the orchestra with Arturo Toscanini, and he kept shaking his head that he was upset. And so the conductor smiles and he says something to the effect of, there's only one person on this earth that could have realized on a shortwave radio from halfway across the world that I was missing one violinist, and that is Arturo Toscanini. He understood that when even this one violin maybe could have made a blip at a certain time, but that blip was missing, then it was not perfection. To him, it was a major problem to the whole orchestra. When the Rabbeinu Shalom listens to our tefillos, you would imagine, you would say, what's the difference if I'm here in Beis Medrash or I'm there in. So this is the nafkamina. The Rabbeinu Shalom is the conductor of the world. He listens. When he's daven, we are singing. We are the orchestra on earth to the Rabbeinu Shalom. And if one person is missing, a person should never say, does he really care whether I do right or whether I do wrong? Absolutely, he cares. And it makes a difference in the universe itself. Every mitzvah that is done, the universe benefits for it, not just he himself. There's a certain kedusha that elevates a little bit more in this world. And therefore, it's very imperative that we try to keep us together and do things as a group. And that's why Achdus is always stressed all the time. Now, we see an instance in this parsha, in Parshas Shlach, Moshe Rabbeinu asks Hashem should he send any meraglim, spies to check out the land, because normally that's what you would do before you enter a country. And Rabbeinu Shalom is not happy with the request, but he says, if you want it, send it, which in itself should have been an answer. But he was the leader of the people. He had to make people happy. So he went and he sent them. They already, once they went out of the Klal, of Klal Yisrael, the 12 people, now 2 of them were Kalev ben Yefune and Yeshua ben Nun. They stayed true to Hashem and true to Moshe Rabbeinu, because they were both. Yeshua was a Talmud of Moshe, and he learned from Moshe, and he knew exactly what was going on. And Kalev had Chos Avos, so he also was protected. But at the end of the day, once they left Klal Yisrael's bubble, so to speak, they were already doing whatever they wanted to do. Now, why they did what they wanted to do, because the Torah is made that all of these people were the leaders of Klal Yisrael, each one was a leader of a Shevet, was they had the Shevet's interest in mind. They weren't thinking what the Rebbeinu Shalom as much wanted, but really, if we think about it, Klal Yisrael in the Midbar was a welfare state. They had everything they needed. They had food, they had the mun every single day waiting for them. They had the Be'er Miriam, they had the water, and they had many nisim with Be'er Miriam. They had, the weather was amazing because there was a cover on it. The Rebbeinu Shalom cover used as some sort of a cloud to protect Klal Yisrael from the heat. They had housing. They had anything you wanted. It was utopia. And they felt when Klal Yisrael is going to go into Eretz Yisrael, and in order for them to eat, they're going to have to till the land. They felt they wouldn't be able to handle it. And they didn't have the faith in Klal Yisrael. So therefore, they decided on their own, without permission, to malign the country, to malign Eretz Yisrael, which is Eretz HaKadoshah. What the Rebbeinu Shalom promised is Eretz Avos Chalov Dvash. And they decided, took upon themselves to try to keep Klal Yisrael actually in the Midbar. And that's why they did what they did. They felt they were doing the right thing. But if Hashem tells you something, and things have to be done properly, we have to understand Hashem guides the world, and we don't see, you can't see 40 years down the line. You can't see what's going on. We only things come out later that, hey, but in hindsight, it's like 2020. And then we don't understand what is going on. Same thing we have another place, very interestingly enough, in Rus. It says, Elimelech and Nami went to Moab. They went to Moab because there was a famine in Eretz Yisrael, and whatever the reasons, they had reasons for going there. But they left Klal Yisrael. And because they left Klal Yisrael and they lived in Stay Moab is in the outskirts of Moab, where their stay is like where the farmers lived. It wasn't a place where somebody like Elimelech stature, who was the leader of Klal Yisrael, one of the leaders of Klal Yisrael at that time, he left. He was Parish Minat Tzibur. And because he was Parish Minat Tzibur, what was the first thing that happened? His two sons married out of the faith. They married Mayavi. They married two women from Moab, which already was a problem, even though they were technically Megayer, but they didn't have the upbringing of what a daughter of Elimelech has. And therefore, he was heavily punished, Elimelech, for this. And they came back as paupers. He lost all his money. They came back, and then the story of Rus happens. But at the end of the day, it was the fact that he left Klal Yisrael that started this whole thing with Elimelech, and which actually at the end, we benefited because we Rus joined Klal Yisrael, and Rus is the great-grandmother of David HaMelech. But the point is, he was Parish Minat Tzibur, and because of that, he didn't remain anymore Elimelech as he was before. So that is the issue of Parish Minat Tzibur. And during the Second World War, there were many tzaddikim, gedolim, that had opportunities to leave Europe and to come to America. In fact, there was Rebbe Chanan Wasserman. He was Rosh Yeshiva in Europe, and he was in America collecting for the yeshiva. The war started, and he said, "I'm going back." And they told him, "But you don't understand what's going on over there." He says, "I do understand what's going back, and that's why I'm going back." He's like the captain of the ship leaves the ship last. He wanted to make sure, he says, "My children are there." Now, he actually only had one child, Reb Simcha Wasserman, who was later Rav in Los Angeles, who did not actually have any children, Reb Simcha Wasserman. But he himself, Reb Chanan Wasserman, who was he wrote the Kovetz and the Gemara. He wrote a certain forum that's unbelievable, that every yeshiva bacher is almost required to use that sefer whenever he's learning. And he said, "This is my tafkid. I'm here on earth for my children of the yeshiva, the B'nai Yeshiva, the people who look up to me." And he went back into this, and he got killed over there. And then you had the Slanim Rab also. He also had an opportunity to leave. He didn't leave. There were some Rabbanim that left, the Ger Rebbe, the Belzer Rebbe, but at the end of the day, they felt that we must start, and we have to have some she'eris hapleta, some leftover, so that we can guide Klal Yisrael. While the other ones felt that it was very important I stay with my group of people, because they are who I protect, and they are my children, and I cannot leave them in a time of need. So this is Al Tifresh Minat Tzibur, is such an important key element in a person's life. And then we have Al-Taman Atzba Atzma Chad you assume that just because you're older or just because you've done something many, many times, that is going to be you forever. And that's what the Hillel is nervous about. Hillel says that the Yetzer Hara can hit you at any time, at any age, in any place. So you can't be so confident in yourself and think just because things are going well now and everything you're doing is right, so therefore, I don't have to worry about my neshama because I'm a yeshiva man. I remember seeing Rebellia Dessler. He was at one time he was in Manchester, and one of his talmidim in the yeshiva in Manchester had a chasana in London, and he told him, I got to leave the yeshiva to go to London for this wedding. So he says, how are you going? He says, I'm going by train. It's the only way to really go. So he says, I don't want you to go. She says, why don't you want me to go? He says, because you never know what's going to happen. She says, but I'm a yeshiva bacha. I'm going to carry along a sefer. I'll look at my sefer. He says, so Rebelli Dessel then was not a young man. And he says, I don't even trust myself. So I don't know, you as a young man, hot-blooded, you never know what you could say, see, do, or whatever it is. He says, you have to be very, very careful. I think at the end he did go, but this was a lesson for him to know. Now, there was a Kohen Gadol in the Beis Hamikdash, Yochanan Kohen Gadol. He was 80 years, he was the Kohen Gadol. Imagine, that was like, he died, he was like close to 100. And he was mishamished as Kohuna Gedolah for 80 years. And at that point, after 80 years of being in the Mishamish and Kohen, now could you get any more holy than that? You know, when Kohen Gadol is the only human being that once a year is allowed to go into Kadsha Kodeshim, go into a place in the Beis Hamikdash that's sectioned off. Nobody's allowed to go in there. Only once a year on Yom Kippur, the Kohen Gadol goes in there and he does his avodah in Kadsha Kodeshim. That's the inner sanctum of Beis Hamikdash. Such kedusha there that if there was a problem with the Kohen, he didn't make it out alive. His neshama couldn't handle the kedusha there, and he died on the spot. In fact, they used to tie a rope to the leg of a Kohen Gadol, and the Kohen Gadol on the bottom of his clothing had little bells. And as long as the bells were tinkling, they knew that everything was okay inside. But if they all of a sudden they stopped tinkling, so they would yell from the outside to hear his voice, and if they didn't hear him, they assumed that he had passed away, and they would pull him out because he couldn't go in through the string that was on the Kohen Gadol's leg. That is the kedusha of what a Kohen Gadol has, and Yochanan Kohen Gadol was zoicha to do this 80 times. And after the 80th time, something happened to him, and he became a tzedukah. A tzedukah is an apikoros in a way. Not in a way, he is an apikoros. He doesn't believe in Torah Shabbal Peh, the Shabbat. He doesn't believe in the Gemara. So something happened. So you see, you never, ad yoim moishcha, till the mamish the day somebody, one of the Gedolim, I don't remember who it was, went to Rabbi Eliashiv and said he's very ill and he has 2 weeks to live. He says, what should I do? What should I learn? I have 2 more weeks? He said 2 or 3 weeks I have to live. What should I learn? So Eliashiv tells him, I want you to learn Musar. And he looked at him, he expected him to say some Kabbalah, no, learn Musar. Even 2 or 3 weeks before you pass away, you would think, okay, maybe I can do this now because I have 2 weeks left. I'll be more a heter. I'll give myself a heter. Says Rabbi Eliashiv, no. 2-3 weeks to live, learn Musar. We should know exactly how to continue bathing up to the last second. And this is what we learn from this week's parasha, that you can't trust yourself in by Elimelech and the Rus, you can't trust yourself. A person is a human being. Human beings are fallible, and unfortunately, people learn they do things that they don't intend to, but it turns out wrong. Once you do it once or twice, there's a Gemara that says "Nasa like a het." If you do something more than once, in the beginning you're nervous, you don't want to do it. You do it once, you're really almost upset. You do it a second time, you get a little more used to it. By the time you do it the third and fourth, fifth time, it becomes heter, it becomes allowed. So you all of a sudden are in a position where whatever you thought was bad before, today is not such a big problem. And that's what we have to worry about. So that is, first of all, the first kolum that he said with this. Um, is a very obvious saying over here, that a lesson that we should learn. You go outside and you see there's so many instances you see somebody do something, and you think that you are judging somebody else because you think that what that person is doing is wrong. There was a story of a man, and I'm going to finish with that, who was on a plane to Eretz Yisrael. He's on a plane to Eretz Yisrael, and his neighbor, who was obviously another Yid that was sitting next to him. And now this man who was on his plane to Eretz Yisrael looked like a Rosh Hashiva. He didn't even take off his hat the whole trip. He had his nicely coiffed beard. He had the kapata. He was dressed like as if he was a Chashuva person. And he noticed he ate today when they bought him some food. He didn't make a bracha, and he was very upset. The man was the whole time was like, and then during the trip they daven mincha, and so they called in. Anybody want daven mincha? And he said no. And the man is looking at him. Here we have a Rosh Hashiva here, and he's not davening mincha. He's not making brachas. He's not usually would have a gemara. He was sitting gemara. Nothing. He had some little sefer, but it was not. It was and he didn't understand what's going on, and finally he couldn't hold himself back. And he says, he's getting to it, so he says, "Sir, I have to ask you a question. I'll tell you the honest truth. I'm very troubled, and I need an answer. I must ask you this question." He says, "I noticed you didn't make a bracha. I noticed you didn't go daven." He says, if somebody sees this, they're going to learn from you. They're going to think it's okay just because you're on a plane and people think they don't see you. But I noticed, and it bothers me." So the man looks at him with these sad eyes, and he says, "I'm going to Eretz Yisrael because I'm an avail, and my father's Aron is on the bottom of the plane, and I'm taking for Kvura to Eretz Yisrael. The halach is until you make Kvura, you're not allowed to do any mitzvahs. You don't daven, you don't make a bracha, you don't bench, you don't do anything of these things." He didn't know that, but he saw something that didn't look proper, and he judged him already. You never know what the person is either going through, or B, what he has now, why he's doing whatever he's doing. So we should just know that we should learn from these parshas and from whatever we had now, that most people are good inherently, and what they're doing is most likely the proper thing. We just have to judge them in the context that they're in. And with that, I'll finish. We should have a wonderful Shabbos and have a good day.